Alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today we will be myth busting diabetes mellitus part 2, in which we will be discussing insulin resistance. So along the way, a curious things which happens in the body, and one of them is insulin resistance, which basically develops when high influx of carbohydrates and sugary content goes in the blood. The pancreas, it releases insulin when it senses a high sugar in the blood, and then the insulin is eventually releasing, and sugars are in the blood and insulin is in the blood. But what happens is, on a cellular level, the body cells, they do not want sugar in them. So they build a shield around themselves, and to slow down the influx of sugar, because they don't want sugar in themselves, so they build a shield around themselves from insulin, from sugar, to lower that body sugar level. So this is insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is the best protective response of the body to protect itself from sugar. It's an adaptive physiological response of the body when it undergoes a lot of overeating of carbs and glucose. So as we discussed, that as the time goes on, the sugars in the blood, they increase, and pancreas is making more insulin to deal with this elevated sugar, and cells are somehow reluctant to absorb more sugar in them, and they undergo a shutting of the gates to not to let sugar come inside the cells, and they become insulin resistant. So this leads to a very curious situation in which the blood sugar levels are high but cellular levels are very low. So the body perceives itself as if it's devoid of sugar and the sugar levels are going low, although there is a lot of sugar in the blood, but there's very less sugar going into the cells because of insulin resistance. So now a person feels hungry, tired, low in energy, thirsty, and the vicious cycle goes on. Having chronically high insulin is also detrimental for other reasons, like hyperinsulinemia is basically very high levels of insulin, which can lead to obesity, edema, and hypertension. Insulin is the hormone which allows sugars to be stored as fats. Now, more insulin in the body, the more you are going to be fat, and the more there's going to be water retention, that's edema. The more water retention, the more hypertension and more blood pressure. So hyperinsulinemia can also cause plaque development in the arteries, which is also one of the reasons for hypertension. And high levels of sugar can cause a reduction in growth hormone. So there is indirect relationship of sugar with growth hormone, and if there is less growth hormone, so definitely the regeneration of tissues and growth will be reduced. So in 1980s, researchers, they began to ask that whether obesity and coronary artery disease, hypertension, and other common medical problems, if they can occur together due to one reason, and that was physiologically leading to the reason of hyperinsulinemia, that all of these three are possible if there is more insulin in blood. And insulin, on the other hand, is prompted, or it's released because of more carbs, or it's released because of constant eating. So hyperinsulinemia can be a reason of many other degenerative diseases, and basic biochemistry, which is in terms giving us a lot of sugars, is actually carbs. The carbs are responsible to convert into sugars, and that's the main purpose of carbs, because they give us energy to do instant things right there and then which the body really needs. So this allows us to define a balanced diet. And if we look at fats give us fatty acids, hormones, prostaglandins, and cell membranes. These are the things which good fat make in our bodies, like animal fat or coconut oil and mustard oil and other oils which are rich in other saturated fatty acids, which in turn turn into these cholesterol, hormones and cell membranes and other things, prostaglandins. Whereas proteins are responsible for giving us amino acids, and amino acids, you all know, are the building blocks of DNA. So carbohydrate intake should be intimately related to our level of activity. If we run a marathon every day, we should have a balanced diet that would probably include 300 grams of carbohydrates per day, which makes 6 brownies and 20 potatoes. And if we sit on the couch all day, obviously our requirement for energy will be much less. Around 65 to 70 grams of carbs would do if we sit on the couch. And if we start consuming more carbs, the whole vicious cycle of insulin, sugar, and insulin resistance will begin. The problem of diabetes can be summarized by saying that the Western diet has us eating like marathon runners. In fact, most of us sit on the couch. And if we regulate the carbohydrate intake and the exercise level, then definitely we'll be able to see how much sugars we're consuming and how much energy we are really draining. And type 2 diabetes, it cannot develop, and in fact we can control it to an extent by following some principles which I will be discussing in my next videos. So thank you so much for watching until part 2. See you in the next parts on myth busting diabetes mellitus. Like, share and subscribe. Ma salama.